Good morning. So, today we are going to talk about a very exciting area of film studies, that is film remakes, film sequels and film series. Before I start going deep into the area, I would suggest that those of you who want to know more about this topic, they should read this book by Konstantin Verovis. It is called Film Remakes. Okay, so it's a seminal book on film remakes. So we know what's a sequel. A sequel carries a movie forward, a plot forward. For example, let's consider the Godfather film. So the first Godfather ends with the death of Don Corleone, as played by Marlon Brando, and his son taking over. His son Michael Corleone, that is Al Pacino, and he taking over the empire. And there is also that famous montage with the killing of the rival mafia families. So this is how the movie ends. Okay, the previous Don's entourage or his supporters, they kissing Michael Corleone's hand and thus giving him the power that once belonged to his father. Now, the second Godfather takes the entire story forward. We have to remember that the Godfather was based on Mario Puzo's novel of the same title, and while the first Godfather is based on the novel, the second Godfather, the second part, the sequel, is entirely a creation of Francis Ford Coppola. So, we have been talking about the new wave directors and how they wanted to be authors, and one of the major desire of the authors was to to have complete control over their materials, including writing their own materials. So, Coppola was not too happy with the first Godfather because it was not based on his own work, but he was more excited and he considered it his more fulfilling achievement, because the second Godfather was after all his own creation, including the written part of it. So, that is just a brief introduction to what is a sequel. A sequel starts once the earlier film ends. A series or a franchise goes on and on and on, and as we have seen, Ocean's series. So, Oceans need not be sequels, okay? They are not, they are more like a series, and after all they are also remake of a famous and very popular TV show of the 60s. So, the Oceans was also based on a TV show starring the so called Rat Pack. So, that was what the recent Ocean series is. So, it can go on and on and on without our being much familiar with what happened in the earlier part of it. Okay. So, that is a series. Remakes is more complicated because you are taking something that has already been there, a text, whether it is a literary text or a cinematic text, or even again like Ocean series, it has been in existence in form of a TV show. The Saint also, the movie starring Val Kilmer, was based on a TV show starring Roger Moore. So, all these are extremely complicated commercial, industrial and aesthetic categories and practices. It is not very simple to understand the theory of remakes. So, there is much that goes on when somebody makes a remake. For example, let us consider our own Don. Shah Rukh Khan's Dawn. I mean, if you consider the 70s Dawn starring Amitabh Bachchan, it's so much a movie of the 70s. You know, you have the film playing on Amitabh Bachchan's superstardom and his double role, and also the fact that the good guy lives on. So that was so 70s. Okay, that that movies have to have a kind of moral center. But when we look at the post liberalized dawn, and we see that it's the first is the good guy that gets killed halfway through the film. Of course, we are told this only at the fag end of the movie. The so-called villain or the anti-hero, he lives on, and there is also a sequel to this Dawn. So it is more, and it has been accepted in a big way by the audience. So we are talking about another star for post-liberalized times and his kind of audience. So he is not just a national level superstar, but Shah Rukh is also a global phenomenon and a very popular star. The second Dawn or the new Dawn, Farhan Akhtar's directorial venture, it caters more to a different kind of an audience. So therefore, it may be a remake, but then it's a remake with a major twist. So every remake, and it has to cater to its audience and the changing socio-political culture of its time. So that's something that we have to understand. Remaking is not an easy job. Remaking is also a very complex, complicated task. So we know that in The Godfather, the second Godfather, it deals mostly with Michael Corleone consolidating his power, whereas in the third Godfather, the focus is on Michael as a much older man trying to divest himself of his power and atone for his sins. So, you know, life comes a full circle for Michael Corleone. That's the idea. So, that's what a sequel does. Now, all sequels need not be numbered. So, we have first or second or third Godfather, but then we have a very popular sequels such as The Mummy Returns, which is a sequel to The Mummy. Then we have The Lost World, which is a sequel to Jurassic Park, and even something as light-hearted as Johnny English Reborn, 2011 movie, which is a sequel to Johnny English, a very popular film by Rowan Atkinson. So, these films refer to the earlier films in the titles, and again they continue a sort of franchise. Again we have films such as Superman. Okay. So, it is all very complicated. It is not easy to understand Superman 1, Superman 2, Superman 3, and then those are numbered sequels, and then in between there was a lull, and again we come back to Superman Returns in 2006, and then we have more recently we had, you know, which was produced by Christopher Nolan. Again we can say the same thing about the Batman series. I mean, Batman was something else altogether when it started as a TV show in the 60s. It was more like a cartoon show, but Tim Burton gave it a dark edge. Batman was no longer a cartoonish show. His movies with Michael Keaton were quite deep, and then Christopher Nolan, of course, as we all know, with his Dark Knight series, he took the character to another level, giving it more shades, more nuances, more edges. So that's what we mean when we say that it's a very complex and an open-ended category, very postmodern category. Now we know that we are also consumers of James Bond movies along with Indiana Jones, Terminator, Rocky, Dirty Harry, Pink Panther, Rambo, Karate Kid, Ghostbusters, Star Trek, Aliens, Cars, and every movie can be read or watched in itself, by itself, and the consumers of these films, they look forward to the next installment of the franchise. Now, these films are generally major studio productions and are high concept films. Now, see, we are talking about film as an industrial practice. There is a concept called the term called high concept, where which means big budget, big studio, and big sets, and very often having big stars. So, even in an animation like Cars, it is not that there are no stars. You have Paul Newman doing the voice for one of the characters. Again, in The Lion King, you had several major stars doing voiceovers for the animated characters, including Jeremy Irons and Nathan Lane, and also Rowan Atkinson. So, what I am trying to tell you is that these are franchises are high concept films, they are not cheap. They have large budgets, they have wide distribution, and they resort to mass scale advertising. These films at the end of it are important part of our growing up. All of us have grown up with the Star Wars films, and once these films are packaged, repackaged, released, remade, we all look forward to these, and they have now they have become a part of our film going experience. Now, sequels may not always be very worthy or very popular. For example, we have been talking about Roman Polanski's Chinatown quite often in this course, but Jack Nicholson's The Two Jakes, which is a 1990 film, is not at all a worthy successor to Chinatown. Here again, Nicholson plays the hard-boiled detective Jack Gittis, and he reprises his earlier role and finds himself at the center of new deception, new lies, but things are not the same. For a remake or a sequel, one has to really do wonders with the subject, as was seen by in the efforts of Christopher Nolan in The Dark Knight. Films such as Scarface, The Three Musketeers, they have been made and remade several times, and every time they meet with a huge amount of success. So, Scarface was originally a Howard Hawks movie starring Paul Muni, and Scarface is an Al Pacino movie directed by Brian De Palma and scripted by, or it was written by, Oliver Stone. So, it was a huge mammoth success. So, it all depends on the treatment that the directors or the writers give, and also the fact how important that film may be for the audience, the target audience, and for the catering to the contemporary times. Three Musketeers and all the remakes and adaptations of Jane Austen or Charles Dickens or even Shakespeare's works, okay, these are universal in appeal, and they always meet with varying degrees of success. So, remakes are attempts to make again an earlier film, often using similar characters and storylines. There are many reasons here aside from technological ones behind remakes, but some are also related to the notion of popularity. Now, Three Musketeers has been remade several times, okay, and the most recent version also provides wuxia style martial arts action sequences, which is funny because these are the times we are living in, and you can't, perhaps the director must have felt that you no longer can rely on the old kind of audience. So, to cater to the newer kind of audience, you have to resort to these sci-fi and martial art practices. It's another story that the attempt was not too well appreciated by the audience as well as by the critics. A very worthy remake is Cape Fear. Now, Cape Fear is was basically a black and white 1962 film, and this was remade by Martin Scorsese, starring Robert De Niro and Nick Nolte, and Robert De Niro plays the role of the psychopath um, who is seeking vendetta. This role was originally played by Robert Mitchum. Now, both Robert Mitchum and Gregory Peck, stars from the earlier Cape Fear, they make an appearance in the newer version. Again, we can consider that how Scorsese is playing homage to the original version of Scorsese being such a cinephile. Also noteworthy is Scorsese's The Departed, which is an Oscar winning remake of the Hong Kong film Infernal Affairs. I would like you to watch the two scenes. One is from Infernal Affairs, and then you should also watch the same scene from The Departed. This is the rooftop scene. So, here is the link. From the 80s onwards, a new pattern of dealing with series, sequels and remakes emerged in Hollywood. This included filmmakers such as Martin Scorsese, who did Cape Fear in 91, Steven Spielberg, who did Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981, George Lucas's Star Wars of 1977, Francis Ford Coppola did Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1992, and his Dracula is not the bloodthirsty Dracula that we were used to from the 40s or the 50s, but this is a more sophisticated, more refined kind of a Dracula as played by Gary Oldman. Then we had, of course, Brian De Palma's Scarface is a supreme achievement, and Paul Schrader's The Cat People. So, most of these films are they have the nostalgic values. In other words, these films nostalgically invoke old genre. Sometimes remakes count on the audience's memory of their own famous predecessors, as with the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, in which the star and director of the original 1956 movie makes brief appearance. At times, other remakes have obscure predecessors for current audiences. For example, Victor Victoria is a remake of the 1993 German film Victor and Victoria, and True Lies, which remakes the 91 French film Le Total. In India, Mehboob Khan remade his own film Aurat as Mother India. Older movie is a forgotten classic, but the newer version, that is Mother India, is a timeless classic. Okay, it has a universal appeal. I would like to talk about now two films which most of you would be familiar with. These films are both from the 80s. Now, the remakes are from the 80s and from our own country. So, first is Satte Pe Satta, which is a remade version of Stanley Donen's Seven Bright for Seven Brothers, which is about seven brothers who are out in the backwoods, and when the oldest among them, played by Howard Keel, he finds a pretty cook as a wife. Now, his brothers too want to follow in his footsteps. The result is a highly energetic and entertaining musical. Here is a scene from Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Now, Raj and Sippy directed Satte Pe Satta in the early 80s. It stars Amitabh Bachchan. This too is a musical, but it reinvents itself as a major Bachchan vehicle. Now see, we have to remember that Seven Brides for Seven Brothers is an ensemble film. It is not a vehicle for the stars, Howard Keel or Jane Powell, but Satte Pe Satta is now remembered for various set pieces with Amitabh Bachchan. Okay, focus is so much on one major star who is a mega star, and other characters definitely do not get as much screen space as they did in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. So, this is one aspect of key element of a remake. You see, in the 80s when Amitabh Bachchan was at the peak of his superstardom, his fans, his audiences expected that the star should be seen throughout the film. So, therefore, there is a double role created for him which does not exist in the original as well at all. The idea is definitely to play on Amitabh Bachchan's angry young man image, therefore, the desire for the second role in the movie and also to give him a major chunk of screen time. So, here is a scene from Satya Pe Satta. I would also like to talk about a wonderful film which is more like middle of the road kind of cinema, Bemisal. Now, this Hrishikesh Mukherjee film is a remake of a classic Bengali film, Ami Seo Shakha. That film starred Uttam Kumar. Bemisal stars Amitabh Bachchan as a very complex character. He is a conscientious doctor, but he had been a troubled teenager and he has suffered a lot, and he is brought up by a very kind family. Now, while in the original the role is played with great elan by Uttam Kumar, the remake focused on Amitabh Bachchan's persona as the angry young man, although it is not the kind of the run of the mill kind of film that generally we associate the commercial cinema category with. So, here is a scene from Ami Se Osaka, and you can also watch if you watch Bemisal, you can watch the same sequence with Amitabh Bachchan doing a similar song. Now, remakes fall into several categories. So, we have the category of readaptation. Readaptations are being as faithful as possible to the original source. For instance, the various adaptations of Charles Dickens or Jane Austen's novels. So, here is a faithful adaptation of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, a novel that has been very often adapted on the film screen. This Wuthering Heights is a TV film starring Tom Hardy. Remakes can also be made more contemporary or updated. For instance, Buzz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet and Clueless with Alicia Silverstone. These are the updated versions of the classic tales. One is by Shakespeare and the second is based on Jane Austen's Emma. So, these adaptations bear a transformational attitude towards the original text. Here is a scene from Clueless, which is an adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma. I would also like to talk about Kurosawa. Kurosawa's Yojimbo is a 1961 film, and it is about a masterless samurai played by his favorite Toshiro Mifune, who goes from place to place earning his living with his sword skills. He comes to a village with two business clans fighting each other, and what follows is a big time entertainment film along the lines of popular westerns. Now, Kurosawa's Seven Samurai was remade in the US under its alternative title, The Magnificent Seven, and the lone samurai hero Yojimbo was the inspiration for Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name persona, most obviously in A Fistful of Dollars, and then Bruce Willis did his own interpretation of Yojimbo in Last Man Standing, which is a 1996 film. So, here is the opening scene from Yojimbo by Akira Kurosawa. You can also compare the opening sequence from Last Man Standing starring Bruce Willis. Now, Kurosawa's reworking of two Shakespearean plays, Macbeth and King Lear, into Throne of Blood and Ran respectively are considered some of the best adaptation of Shakespeare's works. Also remarkable is the way he uses no theatre tradition to interpret Shakespeare. So, of course, if you watch The Throne of Blood, you will understand how highly stylized version of Shakespeare's Macbeth it is, combining the elements of no theatre. Okay, and here I would like you to watch our own adaptation by Vishal Bhardwaj in his Maqbool. The Manchurian Candidate is yet another great movie which has been adapted and remade recently. The original version, the 1962 version, was directed by John Frankenheimer, and this is a Cold War thriller about brainwashing, conspiracy, the dangers of international communism, McCarthyism, political assassinations and political intrigue. Now, the central roles are played by Lawrence Harvey and Frank Sinatra. Lawrence Harvey is the senator's son who is brainwashed, and the setting is the Korean War. He is a Korean War hero who is brainwashed particularly by his own mother, and he is programmed as an agent to assassinate a US presidential candidate. The film is set in the early 50s during the height of right wing McCarthyism, a time of tense political paranoia with the overriding fear that communists will soon take over. Its two memorable scenes are the opening brainwashing sequence staged for prisoners of war as a garden club party, and the climax scene during a political convention in Madison Square Garden. The film can be regarded in several categories. It is a war film, it is a science fiction film, it is also a black comedy and a political thriller at one level. So, here is the scene from The Manchurian Candidate, which is 1962 version. The Manchurian Candidate, the 2004 version, was directed by Jonathan Demme, starred Denzel Washington, and here the remake is now updated for the contemporary time. So, that is what I was telling you about, that remake, in order to be successful, and the remake, the remade version of The Manchurian Candidate was an acclaimed commercially and critically version. So, it updates itself to from Cold War paranoia for the war on terror age. So, again it situates itself into the socio-political climate of the United States. So, the villains here now are no longer the communists or even the Iraqis whom our hero finds himself fighting in Kuwait during the eve of Operation Desert Storm. Instead, the villains are the military industrial complex bigwigs who thirst for profit and control of the Oval Office. What do you understand when we say that this film has a cult following, or this film has a cult status? Now, if you look at it very academically, the term suggests any film that for a reason and which is unrelated to its inherent or intrinsic artistic qualities, the film has, or the work has attracted excessive devotion from a group of fans. So, any work that attracts devotion, unquestioning devotion from a group of loyal friends, it becomes a cult work. You need not worry too much about, or you need not argue too much about the artistic merits or demerits of the work. Because a work is popular among a certain section of people, it becomes a work of cult. Okay, so it acquires a cult status. Now, for instance, the Hollywood director Edward Wood, on whom Tim Burton made a movie called Ed Wood with Johnny Depp playing the lead. Now, his films have gathered a cult following. The expression that is generally used in relation to Edward Wood was that he was so bad that he was very good. Wood's films were cheap and low budget and inexpensive, so much so that in his famous Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is a 1958 science fiction horror thriller, the spaceships were represented by paper plates, and you could see that, but it does not really matter. Here is a scene from Plan 9 from Outer Space by Edward D. Wood. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is yet another popular cult movie. It is now a great cultural phenomenon. This combines the conventions of science fiction, musical and horror films with also elements of gender interrogation. So, the plot concerns the misadventures of Brad and Janet, a young couple, inside a strange mansion that they come across on a stormy night. Greeting them at the door is a ghoulish butler called Riffraff, who introduces them to a weird group of partygoers dressed up in outlandish outfits. Things get stranger by the moment. Now, cult films are also known for their peculiar titles. So, in the 70s, we had a couple of directors who would cater to a section of audience and entice them with titles such as Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, Pink Flamingos, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians and Attack of the 50 Feet Women. Now, these movies may not be artistically much to talk about, however, at the core of it they have a die-hard audience, and filmmakers such as Quentin Tarantino, they swear by these films, you know. So, you even in Kill Bill you will find elements from Faster Pussycat. So, that is the cultural impact of certain kinds of cult films. Ziggy Stardust was directed by D. A. Penbaker and starred the rock legend David Bowie in the lead. The film celebrates rock and roll, the glam rock, and also offers a treatise on celebrity, life, death and loss of fame. It had a cult following primarily because of its music and the androgynous appeal of David Bowie. In more recent times, we have someone like Tim Burton, who has made Mars Attacks, which is his take on Ed Wood's science fiction films of the 50s. The setting is Washington DC and Las Vegas. The plot is very simple. The earth is visited by a group of Martians and different people across America respond differently. Here is a scene from Mars Attacks. Cult films are often confused with the so called B pictures. Now, what are B pictures? There is not much of a difference. Let me tell you, they are used, the two terms are used interchangeably. B films are those that have questionable taste and decorum, again like cult films. They would rarely find a place among top notch film festivals and also at the Oscar awards. They are also characterized by eccentric characters, by unpredictability of the plot and general idiosyncrasy. Now, Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs is a perfect example of a B picture. When it was first released, Tarantino was not what he has become now. So, again it has quirky and eccentric written all over it. The characters are unpredictable, the violence is gratuitous, and the film as in the category of or in the convention of all B pictures, it was cheaply made. It did not win any major award at the time of its release. Again, as is characteristic in Tarantino, the film borrows liberally from films from the past, including the color coded names of its characters from 1974 film The Taking of Pelham 123. Also, the last 20 minutes of the film is a total borrowing from the Hong Kong film City on Fire. Reservoir Dogs did poorly at the box office since reviewers warned off the audience, especially because of its famous ear splicing scene. However, today it is a cult film where the die-hard fans can rattle off all the dialogues without much prodding. I would like to end today's talk with Reservoir Dogs, the opening scene.